So I want to address a question that I think has come up in certainly a lot of our reporting, and it's a theme that if we are the media, we certainly didn't invent gentrification. So first, I'd ask if you could. I find that it sort of does mean something different to everybody. And I won't ask you to define it in terms of good or bad, but just tell us a little bit about what it means to you. And I'll start with you, Professor Truong. What does gentrification mean to you, and what has it meant for the city, and what does it mean going forward as well?
I mean, the way I see it, and I think because I'm new to DC and I've been a reporter in a lot of other cities where gentrification is happening, is that there's a national trend of renewed interest in urban cores. And that in the old days, the so-called
redevelopment.
Exactly.
Okay.
And just movement of mostly white, professional, wealthy populations into the inner cities. And that this was something, back in the 80s, the American dream was to have the house in the suburbs, in the gated community, in your subdivision, and be away from the city. And now we're seeing that the parts of the city that used to be the ghettos, and I mean that in the very traditional sense of where immigrant populations first moved in and where working class populations built their communities, are now becoming places of interest to the people who used to be traditionally out in the suburbs.
So the district is part of a larger trend here.
It is, and yet it's very unique in a lot of ways, which I'm sure we'll
Right.
get into in this segment.
So Tindani, tell us a little bit about how gentrification. Well, first of all, tell us what it means to you and what that word means in especially where you live in Southeast, but also what. Just tell us a little bit about what it means for Southeast.
Yeah, simply put, it means change for all those east of the river, or all of those who are in communities that are going to experience that type of development. When you look at gentrification historically, you will see, for example, in the film I produced and edited, Berry Farm Past and Present, it's focused on this community, Hillsdale. It was the first African-American community in the nation established after emancipation. And this community was about 400 acres of freed blacks who'd own 1 acre lots, all right? And that community was also founded in 1867 when Howard Normal and Theological Institute was established, which is now Howard University. The same man, General Howard, helped us establish both of those. And you see now that it went from everyone owning 1 acre, from 1 in 4 people to going to Howard University, from everyone being crammed up in project, subsidized housing, to 1 in 4 people in Berry Farm probably going to DC jail right now instead of Howard University. How does this happen? And historically, what you see is you're talking about African Americans who've been migrating from place to place to place to place for at least the past few centuries, all right? And it's a microcosm of colonization in its essence. But what you see is that people are not in control of their environment where they will live because they lack the social, economic, and political power to be able to have enough clout or enough power in order to have a say-so and where they're going to remain.
So you're saying, are you saying that change is going to happen, but the people living there don't get a say in that change?
On one side, you have some people who benefit, some people who are stable enough socially, economically, and politically.
Who are some people?
Or a combination. Well, one thing you have to do to be able to survive gentrification is be able to afford to live, And in District of Columbia, which you see, and other places nationally, because this is a trend, you see that okay, some people may not be in project housing. They may be in a community where everyone's homeowners, but then the property tax raised. And they can't afford to pay the property taxes anymore. So they end up selling or having to move or just not having the right financial resources or guidance to make it through. And then you have people who live in, subsidized housing that's directly owned by the government, directly not owned by the people. And in that situation, what kind of demands can you make, especially if you're not legally, educated, and you're not experienced in how to deal with that situation, and then you lack, like I said, the social, economic, and political power that you need to stay where you've been in that space. So this is a historic thing. It isn't anything new. It's like I said, it's a people who've been migrating from place to place, being told where they will live for the past 2 centuries, and these are the people who are most adversely impacted by gentrification.
Well, let's bring it a little bit back to the recent election. Jonathan, do you think, did certain things speed up in regard to gentrification, or did somehow Adrian Fenty come to embody that trend?
Well, I think the discussion about like urban cores being more attractive and people moving back to nearer to their jobs is much bigger than whatever politician we have in town. I mean, people wanted to come back into DC. People were going to build new housing and develop new buildings downtown, regardless of who the mayor was, right? Because it's an attractive place to be, because people are sick of long commutes and want to be close to the Capitol and the federal government, which is more important than ever, right? So I think that it's bigger than any politician. Now, there are very important policies that a mayor has control over as it pertains to affordable housing, which I think most people would agree is the main, the main concern. Affordability of housing when gentrification comes is like, will people be displaced because they cannot afford to live there anymore? And when it comes to Fenty, I think there's another disconnect here where, while Fenty was mayor, there are a number of, affordable housing guidelines and policies and rules are very aggressive compared to the rest of the country. So, every public-private project that they do where new housing is built, there are affordable units in there at varying levels of income requirements, right? But I don't think that people think when those buildings are going up that Fenty actually is putting affordable housing in. For whatever reason, I don't think the message is getting across that he actually is, that is happening. And so I think that when you say gentrification, it's a word, it has a real definition, but people think of it in it's such an emotional word.
Largely negative.
You throw it on somebody, oh yeah, I think, yeah. And I think largely because, as you all were pointing out, if you're wealthier, you have more opportunity to move where you want to, and the poor people have less resources, skills, power, whatever it is, to try to fight back in some way, and they do get pushed out to wherever the wealthier people don't want to live to a large degree.